Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. With that said, though, let's get back one last football topic before we do get to basketball. And boy, do we have some basketball to talk about with what Kentucky did on Saturday to North Carolina. But let's start with college football. Let's end with college football for this episode. And let's talk about kind of a follow-up from Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, Friday's show. And that was the conversation that I kind of had on Texas A&M on last Friday's show. I kind of talked a lot about Travis Hunter, talked a lot about Deion, and I briefly mentioned, oh, by the way, Texas A&M signed the number one high school class in the country. But what was interesting was Texas A&M was not done. Since I last recorded, they have signed 2 more 5-stars and added one of the top transfers in college football. This is after signing day. They've added 2 5-stars and one of the top transfers in college football. And so I'm just going to sit here and say, I know it sounds crazy. I know it seems absurd. But after what Texas A&M did on last Wednesday and what they've done since and what they could still do in the late signing period, I think it's time that we start having the conversation that over the next 2, 3, 4 years, Texas A&M could turn into the next great superpower in college football. I know it feels a little aggressive. I know it feels a little insane, but I'm going to explain to you why if you look at the stats, if you look at the data, it really is not as crazy as you think. And to backtrack, I really do think this whole story really goes back to Wednesday, where it really was surreal to watch in real time. I told you about it a little bit on Friday's show, but Texas A&M came into the day with the number 3 class in America, and then it seemed like every hour on the hour, they were just getting another guy after another guy after another guy, to the point that there were times where I was tuning in and kind of half paying attention, and I thought they were showing replays of previous guys to commit, only to see that in actuality, oh no, this is a new 5-star guy that has committed since then. I mean, it started early. Jake Johnson, number 1 tight end in America. He commits. That's the brother of Max Johnson, the former LSU quarterback, son of Brad Johnson, the NFL quarterback. He commits early. Then from there, you have Anai White from Philadelphia, 5-star defensive lineman, 4-star defensive lineman Anthony Lucas, 4-star offensive lineman Cam Dewberry, on and on and on and on and on. And like I said, it seemed like every hour on the hour, Texas A&M was getting another commitment from another top 100 player, and they closed Wednesday with the number 1 class in America. If that is where they ended, it would have been an incredible, incredible day, month, and year for Jimbo Fisher and his staff in the 2022 signing period. But here's the thing. After signing day ended on Wednesday, you know what happened? Thursday, they officially got a signature from Evan Stewart, 5-star wide receiver. He had been committed to A&M throughout this cycle, but there was talk that late in the process he could flip. The number 2 wide receiver in America, 5-star wide receiver, officially signs his letter of intent on Thursday. Then on Friday, Max Johnson, the transfer quarterback from LSU starting quarterback for most of last year, makes the decision that he, in fact, is going to transfer to Texas A&M following his brother Jake Johnson, the number 1 tight end in America. And then on Saturday, how about this? Denver Harris, 5-star cornerback, number 3 cornerback in the country behind the kid Travis Hunter that committed to Jackson State, on top of Damani Jackson, who committed to USC, which we'll talk about in a minute. Denver Harris, the number 3 corner in the country, committed to Texas A&M. And so you now have a class, number 1 class coming out of Wednesday. You add the number 2 wide receiver in America. You add one of the top transfer quarterbacks in America. You add the number 3 cornerback in the country, and it is incredible. And this is where A&M's recruiting class currently stands if nothing else happens. Right now, A&M has 15 of the top 100 players in America signed to go to Texas A&M. 15 of the top 100 players in America, which is absolutely insane. Of the top 17, let me put it this way, of the top 17 players in Texas that have committed, 10 are going to Texas A&M. There are 3, I believe, that are uncommitted, and I should mention that number is even a little bit deceptive because of the fact that a couple were quarterbacks, a couple were guys that Texas wasn't going to take because of the fact that you only take 1 quarterback in a class. And so you talk about a Texas haul in recruiting. It is absolutely insane. 15 of the top 100 players, and I should mention, there are 2 top 10 players that are currently unsigned, uncommitted, one of which is Harold Perkins, a linebacker from Cypress, Texas, Texas A&M lean, and also on top of that, Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M lean, a defensive lineman from Florida. And so I bring it up because, listen, I don't want to say this is recruiting unlike anything that we've ever seen, but for Texas A&M to elevate number 1 class in the country, add 2 more guys after signing day, and have 2 more 5 stars leaning in their direction, we could be looking at one of the great recruiting classes in all time, which brings me to what I just said a minute ago. Are we looking at a scenario where Texas A&M eventually elevates itself into one of the premier programs in college football that can, on a year-in, year-out basis, compete with Alabama, compete with Ohio State, compete with whoever those top teams are 2, 3, 4 years from now? Because I think it's possible, and I think we have to accept the fact that in the next 3 or 4 years, there is a chance that we could see Jimbo Fisher hoisting that national championship trophy over his head. And I know it sounds crazy, and I know Texas A&M's coming off an 8-4 year, and I know they lost to Coach Joe and LSU on the final day of the regular season, but we have kind of data to back up the fact that when you sign the number 1 class in the country and you do what Texas A&M has done over a 4, 5, 6-year sample size now under Jimbo Fisher, that eventually a national championship game appearance, if not a national championship game, is going a national championship itself is going to come. And that's what's so interesting, right, is that, look, there are some times in life and in sports where narratives in sports are overrated. But one that is not, and I'm not the first person to talk about this, but one narrative that is not overrated in sports at all is the idea that recruiting matters. Because when your team has a bad recruiting class or you lose a kid or whatever, you always, recruiting's not that important. Well, here's the deal. We now have data over about a 20-year sample size since these recruiting rankings were first starting to kind of become a thing popular on the internet. Recruiting became a national billion-dollar industry. We now have data from about 20 years, and the data is indisputable. While you, and when I say you, while the recruiting rankings may miss on a guy or 2 or this or that, while a coach might not be able to deliver the talent, get it over the hump, win a national championship, if you are bringing in the types of classes that Jimbo Fisher is bringing in, history tells us, statistically we know, that there is a very good chance that you're going to be competing for national championships in the very short term, okay? So I looked up these stats before they came on the show. This is courtesy of 24/7 Sports. Of the last 19 number 1 recruiting classes coming into this cycle, okay, of the last 19 recruiting classes that were number 1 in the country, 13 of them in the 4 years after that number 1 recruiting class, 13 of 19 have played for a national championship. And 11 of 19 number 1 recruiting classes have ultimately won a national championship. So basically, we have a pretty good track record over 2 decades that Jimbo Fisher, by signing the number 1 recruiting class, there's a 75% chance that he is going to play for a national championship and about a 50% chance that he is going to win a national championship. And I should mention, by the way, that a lot of the classes that quote-unquote didn't pan out, number 1 classes that didn't ultimately end up competing or winning national championships, it was because there was a coaching change somewhere involved, right? Pete Carroll signed a couple number 1 classes late in his coaching tenure. He leaves, NCAA sanctions get issued, and so that's kind of a deal right there. Randy Shannon, believe it or not, at Miami signed a number 1 recruiting class. He did not get to the finish line with that group before he was ultimately let go. Urban Meyer, we just talked about Urban Meyer a minute ago, signed a number 1 class at Florida, and he left shortly after he signed that class back in, I believe it was 2009, which was the number 1 class in the country. Statistically, according to the numbers, still one of the 2 or 3 best classes of all time. And so essentially, the data tells us that if you sign a number 1 ranked recruiting class and you stick it out for 4 years with those players, there's more than a 50% chance that you're going to at least be there's more than a 75% chance that you are going to be competing, playing for a national championship, and there is more than a 50% chance that you are going to win a national championship. And so you add that to the fact that every single team that has won a national championship in the last 20 years has signed at least 1 top 10 recruiting class. And oh, by the way, most of them have signed 2, 3, or 4 in the 4 years prior to their national championship. You're looking at a situation where you can make fun of Jimbo Fisher, you can make fun of Texas A&M, you can say it'll never happen, you can say this, you can say that, you can say Bama, you can say whatever. I'm just telling you, the data backs up that A&M is about to go on a 2-3 year run here that could be unprecedented in their school recent history. Keep in mind, this isn't just a one-year blip on the radar recruiting-wise. This is now the 4th straight year since Jimbo Fisher took over, 19, 20, 21, 22, that they have signed a top 10 class. And beyond that, again, the data tells you sign a number 1 class, you're going to be in really good shape. And I would also say everything else is kind of in place, right? They're in the SEC. They have great facilities. They have a coach that has done it before, which I don't think can be undervaluated and underexpressed in this particular situation. Jimbo Fisher knows what it takes to win a national championship. He's done it. He's made a college football playoff. He had A&M on the brink last year, and now you start to elevate the talent across the program over the 3, 4, 5 years of the kids in the program, and it's a complete game changer. And so I'm not saying that tomorrow they're going out and beating Alabama and taking over the SEC. But what I am saying is over the next 3, 4, 5 years, is there going to be a scenario where Texas A&M is in the college football playoff? I think so. Is there a scenario where Texas A&M is going to be competing for a national championship? I think so. Is there a possibility that over the next 2, 3, 4 years, if A&M continues to recruit this way in subsequent years, that there's multiple playoff appearances, multiple national title game appearances, potentially multiple national championships? I think so. You got the coach. You have now 3 good quarterbacks in the program with the kid Haynes King, who started the season as starting quarterback before he got hurt. Now Max Johnson, now Connor Wegman, the 5-star that came in this current 2022 class. And oh, by the way, they're off to a pretty good start in 2023 as well. So I'm just telling you, don't shoot the messenger. But history tells us that Texas A&M has a chance to be a national championship threat in the coming years.